Hello. Jasper Donat here, CEO of Branded. We are the producers of Sports Matters, Music Matters, anything else that matters. Coming live from Singapore today. Welcome to the Sports Matters Academy. It's a series of virtual events designed to help build a foundation for anyone interested in the sports business. And we're going to learn and upskill through the mentorship and knowledge sharing of some amazing global industry icons. So it's really the business of sport taught by the sports business themselves. We have almost 400 of you registered today from 33 countries around the world. So thank you for joining. It's the second in our Learning Matters series and follows hot on the heels of our Music Matters Academy, which to date has recorded over 100,000 views. And watch this space for more Learning Matters events. Excuse me for using this opportunity to promote ourselves, but we are going to be announcing the Gaming Matters Academy shortly, and there'll be other stuff going on in the creative and influencer space. The Sports Matters Academy is delivered over 8 modules. It's produced by, with, and for the Asia Pacific sports business community, with some of the most accomplished executives, player managers, athletes, and creative minds to provide guidance and insight to aspiring professionals. Throughout the series, we will be covering some really important topics: sports rights today, sports marketing, working with sponsors, live events, the importance of data, player management, and sports law. And then finally, we're going to be talking about the metaverse and more. There will be other subjects coming up. So if you have any ideas of stuff that you'd like us to be talking about, please do give us that feedback and we will look at it. Back to today, as I mentioned, we're talking about the buying and selling of sporting rights. If you're a rights holder, an athlete, an event owner, a team owner, a platform, it's one of the most, if not the most important revenue streams in sports. We're going to be talking across 2 sessions, this one and then later on at 5 o'clock this afternoon. The content is virtual, it's live, and it's fireside. We want to hear from you. We want it to be interactive. So we've got some amazing speakers, but they want to hear from you. So please ask your questions. There's a little chat box. Get your questions in. They will be fed to the moderators and they will ask them to the speakers. There is also a smaller private meet and greet. Meet the speakers after each session. So if you've got any more personal questions for them, please join that. You just go back into the agenda on the website and you'll see the session there. We've got a limited number in those. So, and I think the first one's nearly full, but do join after the session if you can, and you can ask a lot of questions as well. In a minute, I'm going to introduce you to our first moderator, but first, you'll notice that the Sports Matters Academy is free to attend. And that is 100% thank you to our supporters and partners, including Football Marketing Asia, Sports Singapore, SportBusiness, plus support from Mailman, Sports Tech, and Pictureboard. Finally, thank you for joining. Please enjoy, please learn, and please don't forget to get those questions in. And as I said, get me feedback. What did you enjoy about this? Also, what else would you like to see? On with the show. As we mentioned, we're talking about the important subject of sporting rights today. The explosion of digital media has had a significant effect on sports leagues, events, and athletes, driving rapid evolution of rights, but they still remain the key revenue driver worldwide. So today we've got buyers and sellers who understand the complexities of this market. What are the success stories? What are the rookie errors that people are making? How can rights holders maximize the use of their content? What are some of the future areas of growth for the sports industry? And really, does the metaverse actually matter? Let's meet our moderator, our first moderator. We're going to be helmed this morning by our friend Kevin McCullagh. He's the editor of Sports Business Asia Pacific and one of the most respected sports industry commentators in the region, if not beyond, and one of our partners in the Academy. So, Kevin, thank you so much for helming, for moderating today. And I'm going to hand over to you in a second, but I have a question for you first. From a journalist perspective, so you get to talk to everyone, buyers, sellers, the lot. How important are sports rights in the entire value chain?
Well, thanks very much, Jasper, for that very kind introduction. So as you touched on, sports media rights is one of the three big traditional commercial revenue streams in sport, alongside sponsorship and then all the revenue that comes from live events, so ticketing and so on. At SportBusiness, we track the value of the major sports media rights deals all around the world. And according to our data, in 2021, the total value of all these deals was $52.1 billion. So you can imagine that's a very large chunk of global sports industry revenues. And this, therefore, a hugely important part of the industry for everyone within it to understand.
Brilliant. Well, Kevin, I'm going to hand over to you. But again, please, anyone watching, any questions you want to ask Kevin or any of the speakers, get them into the chat and we'll feed them to Kevin. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Jasper, and welcome to all the viewers. So yes, my name is Kevin McCullagh. I'm the editor of SportBusiness in Asia Pacific. SportBusiness is a B2B media publisher serving the global sports industry with news, data, and information. And very proud partners of Sports Matters Academy. And today on Sports Matters Academy, we're looking at the sports media rights business. So that's the part of the industry that deals with securing media coverage of sports events on television, streaming platforms, and other media platforms around the world, so that global audiences can watch and enjoy their favorite sports. And I presume that many people watching will be broadly familiar with the idea that TV companies and other media companies pay large amounts of money, certainly for the bigger sports, and that this accounts for a significant amount of sports industry revenue. We're going to try and dig underneath that and give you a bit of a grounding in some of the basic concepts with some very distinguished guests with long experience in the sports media rights space. I'll introduce them just very briefly, one by one now, before getting into questions for each of them. We've got Andrew Guy, EVP Business Affairs and General Counsel at Football Marketing Asia. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Kevin, thank you. And thanks a lot to Jasper and Branded for the opportunity today.
Not at all. We'll also have on the call in a little bit Rubin, Zhong, Chief Content Strategy Officer at SPOTV, the pan-regional Asia-Pac pay television sports broadcaster. Rubin, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show. All right. Good afternoon to everyone. All right. Thanks for making time to attend our session as well.
Thank you, Rubin. And we have Joyee Biswas, Director of Media Partnerships, Asia Pacific at Meta. Joyee, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to this session.
Okay, guys. Well, listen, I'd like to start by visiting some of the basic concepts and dynamics that underpin the sports media rights business. We're going to start from the start. And Andrew, I'd like to start with you, if I could. And you're a lawyer by trade, so I think you're in a good place to answer some quite fundamental questions. When we talk about sports media rights, can you tell us what these rights are, where they come from, how they arise, who owns them, and just why they're so important?
Thanks, Kevin. That's an easy one off the bat. I mean, basically, it comes down to a discipline of law, which is called intellectual property. So, and in intellectual property, it's copyright. So if you or I write an article, as you do, if we take a photo, if we take a video on our phone, we actually own that. We own the copyright. So in effect, a sports federation or a club, they own the copyright of anything that takes place on their property, in their ground. So if they welcome cameras into their ground, they own the property now of that video, that recording of their match or their game. And once you own something, you can, of course, sell something, you can monetize it. So what the underlying rights are, the copyright, which is then sold by a club or a federation or whoever controlled that venue. Now, I guess that what happens and the way that the media rights have started to grow is also a concept of centralization. So clubs or federations putting those rights together in a pot to make it something bigger and therefore more valuable. So what does that mean? I suppose in our case, Japan could actually sell the rights to its own home games, but it can't tell the story to a broadcaster or to a fan in full because they can only show their home games. So what people like the AFC have done, or the Premier League, they've centralized all of those rights. So everybody puts their home games in and you create a pot, and now you've got something more valuable. So it's the sale of property effectively, and controlling that sale of property, that you can sell part of it or all of it to one or more people in different countries.
Very good. And yes, that idea of centralization is very important. As you said, for example, in the Premier League, each club owns the rights to its home games only, but the Premier League gets together, pools all the rights to these home games, and then is able to sell them, as a full league season to broadcasters. So to put these fundamentals in a bit more context, Andrew, you did touch on it there, but can you tell us a little bit about your company, FMA? You guys manage one of the most valuable sets of sports media rights in Asia. So that's the global media rights to Asian Football Confederation competitions. So can you tell us about what sort of company FMA is, how you got these rights, and then what your job is in relation to them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so these rights exist for the AFC, they hold them in perpetuity effectively. I mean, that's not strictly true because federations could pull away, but they will, and they continue to be able to sell them. And they're always looking either to sell them themselves, to market those rights themselves, or indeed to ask somebody else, a more commercially focused perhaps company, to market and sell those rights for them. And so FMA was put together at a time where the AFC went to the market and asked people to make offers for their rights. So FMA, former name was DDMC Fortis, made an offer to be the exclusive agent to the AFC, and we won that mandate. And so, we have the right to commercialize, to market, to improve, and to sell those rights on behalf of the AFC. It's an exclusive mandate, which in some ways gets, you don't have much variation. We deal with one client, but I like that. I like dealing with one client because everything you do, you're not conflicted. You go to the market with one property, and you can then sell that and showcase that at the best, and not to the expense of other products. So we sell the media rights. We do all the marketing around it in conjunction with the AFC, close collaboration with them, and then we sell all the sponsorship rights. Because of course, going back to the original point, if you own the cameras and you own the match footage, you can also sell the pitch perimeter boards as well. So we have a deal with the MAs and the clubs whereby they give some of their in-stadium inventory to us, and then we commercialize that on their behalf. Okay,
great. And so what you've got there is you've got essentially a sports organization, AFC. And FMA assists the AFC in commercializing its rights. Tell us a little bit about why does the AFC need this commercial help? Why do they turn to an organization like yours?
That's a good question. I'm not sure they actually need us. I think they make a choice. They have a choice whether to sell it themselves or not. I'm not within the mindset of the AFC, so I don't know why they took that. I would imagine there are different skill sets. Every company, everybody has a different skill set. Their job as well is their core function is to manage Asian football, to run the footballing side, the sporting side of the game. And therefore they have an agency who can represent them maybe in a different way in the market, but also we have expertise in that commercial market globally, actually, with people who are able to sell in different regions, whereas their focus is understandably on the organization of a sport within Asia.
Very good. So organizations like FMA bring commercial expertise that perhaps a sports organization doesn't have in-house.
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay, Andrew, that was great. Very illuminating on some basic concepts there. Rubin, if I can come to you next. So in your current role, you approach the rights industry from the other side to Andrew. So at SPOTV, you're a buyer of rights as opposed to a seller. Can you tell us a bit about that, about your role and about how broadcasters look at the rights market and make decisions about what to buy?
Yeah, okay. I mean, for SportTV, right, we're not just a buyer, we're also a seller as well. So we go and participate in such tender processes and all that to acquire the rights. And of course, as a pan-regional broadcaster, we have the option, all right, to package the channel and then either go to the market. We can actually present ourselves as an ad to go direct to consumer, or we go to the market by market operators, all right, the likes of Astro in Malaysia, True Visions in Thailand, all right, Singtel and StarHub in Singapore, all right, and then after we do what we call affiliate deals with them. So in essence, we are actually a rights buyer, all right, but also we are a seller of a channel, all right, of a channel service to our affiliates, all right. Of course, I mean, in FMA's case, okay, they can run a tender for AFC rights and all that, right? They can decide to go with a pan-regional broadcaster, all right? Or they can go market by market. If they go market by market, right, that means they go to one of our so-called affiliates, right, directly, all right? Then the market by market operators, all right, StarHub and Singtel, Astro and True Visions, right? They then acquire the rights, put it on their in-house channels, and then after that, sell subscription to their subscription base. Yeah. So hope that answers. Yeah. So
yes.
The other question, of course, is how do we actually assess rights and all that? I mean, of course, different broadcasters, different pan-regional networks and all that, they all have different sort of sports acquisition strategy. All right. I mean, we can get onto the SportTV sort of mindset and how we actually derive the portfolio of events that we actually acquire. But then more or less, it always comes down to a few things, right? I mean, what actually resonates with the audience, all right? Whether the content that you acquire actually answers a gap in your scheduling and programming, all right? Then, of course, the third one will be the budget. Whether eventually you can actually afford the content that is out in the market.
Absolutely, yeah. So you touched on some kind of key considerations for broadcasters there when they're figuring out what sort of rights to buy. So you're thinking about audience, what sort of audiences you want to target, and that could be, I presume, age groups or different countries as well. Obviously, you're factoring in the cost of the rights, and you also talk about different types of content there. So maybe content comes in at different times of day, or some content is more powerful than others. Are those the sort of factors you're thinking about there?
Yes, quite frankly, I mean, obviously sports events, live sports events, right? Or the business end is always on weekends, all right? You're always, if you have a sports network, all right, that does not have live events on weekends, then that's not a sports network anymore, right? Basically, whatever you acquire, you have to ensure that your weekend programming is almost full or near full, or at least on every day, at least 2 to 3 events happening, right, on any given channel and all that, right, on average. The challenge is, of course, always during weekday programming, okay, what do you actually acquire to actually fill in the gaps and all that, whether you actually produce your own programs, all right, whether it's sponsor-led or not, or you get live events that actually happen on weekdays. Yeah. So these are all the considerations. You try to make it such that on every single day there will at least be something live on the channel, because if not, then the viewership won't look too good. Yeah. So okay. Yeah.
And how much are you thinking about? You're certainly with SportTV, you look at different markets. So presumably you're thinking this sport is popular in this market, this sport is popular in that market. And are you also thinking about age groups and different types of demographics like that?
Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, we look at, I mean, these are, when we go for tenders, right, we look at a lot of information from the rights holders as well. All right. And one of the key considerations, obviously, how they are staying relevant, okay, across different age groups. Yeah. Because I mean, as we know, I mean, the youngsters nowadays, right, they have different appetite for live sports. Even the IOC for Olympics, right, they're introducing new sports. They're trying to appeal to the young and all that. So these are actually some of the sports events that sport climbing, skateboarding, we are actually taking a closer look at some of these sports events and all that. But of course, the premium ones, the ones that actually get the most eyeballs, okay, your football, your basketball, your tennis and golf, they are the ones that always command the greatest rights fees.
Okay. And so you mentioned, you said a word a couple of times there. You mentioned a tender, Rubin. So tenders are one way that media rights are sold. I was going to ask you to give us some insight into how a broadcaster actually goes about acquiring rights, because you don't just call up MotoGP and Wimbledon and say, I want your rights forever. So how does that actually happen? How do rights get sold?
I mean, obviously there's a whole, I mean, what we call a media rights cycle. All right, each and every rights holder has different media rights cycle. Some goes for 3 years, some go for 5 years. Tennis normally for 5 years, football normally for 3 years or to 6 years, and depending on the market and all that, right? So yeah, I mean, Kevin, as you rightly point out, you don't just feel like wake up in the morning and then you rock up to one of the rights holders and say, hey, I want your rights and all that. I mean, you have to follow their processes and their schedule and their media rights cycle. Okay, basically. So they do send out. I mean, I would also like to clarify one more thing. All right. I mean, in the sports content world, all right, we normally have three tier of content. All right, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Okay, or how I define it. Okay, tier 1 are your subscription drivers. Okay, specifically content. All right, that the broadcaster buys. Okay, and it will definitely guarantee you subscribers, almost always. Okay. Tier 2 are your complementary products, all right? And the tier 3 ones are the good to have. I mean, really, I mean, the ones who are niche, have a niche audience and all that, but trying to get to the tier 2, all right? Almost always the tier 1 rights holder, okay, they will, when they put out the tender, it will be a very massively participated event. I mean, a lot of broadcasters will get, it'll be a frenzy. The whole marketplace will be in a frenzy. Everyone will talk about it, and then the results will be quite nerdy, as we have seen with the most recent Premier League rights tender as well. And I think across Asia, different news articles have been out in different markets to see who the winners and losers are. So that is what Premier League, okay, English Premier League, that's definitely a tier 1 content. Other tier 1 content, of course, includes the Olympics, the World Cup, arguably also Champions League. But also at the same time, okay, what constitutes tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 differs across different countries. As you would imagine, right? I mean, it's the same in Europe and in the States, right? Okay, in Asia, all right, we have, I mean, a diverse number of countries and territories and all that. Each and every country have their different likes for sports. All right. So in the Philippines, NBA is huge, obviously. And in Japan and Korea, baseball is huge and all that. So all of a sudden, all right, these are all content like MLB, okay, the rights tender for MLB, okay, would be heavily participated in Japan and Korea. That's considered tier 1 event over there, or at least tier 2A, all right. While for the rest of Southeast Asia, I mean, for Southeast Asia, we don't really watch baseball. And so that is not as keenly participated, right? So yeah.
Very good. Yeah, listen, you've touched on something which is really at the heart of the, I suppose, of maybe where media rights comes into the general consciousness. When maybe, people think about media rights, they think about the really big auctions. So the most valuable rights, whenever they come on the market for 3 years or the next 5 years, these sales processes can be very competitive with broadcasters like yourselves and others competing for the same rights in the same territory, and that's what can generate these large rights fees that we see that make the headlines, right?
Right. Yes, I mean, for football, especially for football, okay, in this part of the world, football always generates the title rights fees, right? And it always, I mean, there's always the winners and losers will be discussed, right after the tender, and then right even until then, people will start discussing whether the winner will actually be able to make back their investment over the next 2 to 3 years by having it on their platform, and then collecting subscription revenues, sponsorship revenues, broadcast sponsorship revenues, and all that. Yeah. So yeah. But the other thing to stress is that often it's always the tier 1 tenders that are keenly participated. All right. Tier 2 events, all right, there's always a mix. All right. There are those who go out for tender. Okay, there are those who go out for private negotiation. Yeah. The thing with tender is that you need to be keenly participated and you need the different territories to have broadcasters to actually compete for it. If not, it's just going to be it's just not going to be competitive, and you wouldn't get the type of outcome you want. And also at the same time, some agencies or rights holders, right, they almost always prefer to go on private negotiation because it's a little bit more on a relaxed sort of process. You can actually have much more confidential discussion and all that. All right, I mean, through such a process, because when it comes to a tender process, right, it's very, very uptight.
Yeah, so the tender process you're referring to is a bidding process, kind of like an auction. It's quite strictly regulated. Documents will go out to people that are interested. They have to submit a bid by a certain time, and the documents will set out various rules that dictate the bidding and the rights that are on offer. Whereas on the other hand, like I say, that's not the way all rights are sold. Rights are sometimes sold by direct talks. The seller will speak to various possible interested parties in the market, gauge their interest, and elicit bids, and it'll just be a bit less formal, right?
Right, correct. Yeah. I mean, the trouble always happens when you are a tier 2 rights holder and you actually think you're tier 1. All right. So that therein always lies a bit of a mismatch in expectations. Yeah. So
Okay.
that
one of the pitfalls to avoid in the media rights business.
Definitely. Yeah, because once you put out a tender and it's not cleanly participated, right, then it's not actually really good for reputation wise. Yeah. But I think as time goes by, rights holders have become a lot more wiser. They take a lot more good advice in the market and all that. And I think the other thing is, all right, rights holders, right, they almost always, especially those who have been selling rights for, a decade, 2 decades or so, they almost always have their preferred partners in different territories and all that. And sometimes they would have a deal where they will give them a first rights of negotiation, right? So that these rights, you actually give them an opportunity that your preferred broadcaster to actually have the opportunity to renew the rights, all right? So that these rights don't go to the market at all. Yeah.
Okay. Understood. Listen, Rubin, great insights there into the side of the buyer and the whole sales processes. I'm going to skip on to Joyee. Joyee, the sports media rights business has changed tremendously over the past few decades, and I think it's really important to understand where we've come from and where we sit today. And you've been working in the business here in Asia Pacific since the early 2000s. I think you started at one of the really big pay TV players here in the region, ESPN, Star Sports. Would you be able to give us some insights into what the business was like back then and how different it is to now?
Yeah, in short, it's very different now. So, like cable TV goes back a long time, right? Cable TV started in the 40s actually, and the reason cable TV started was, there were signal drops in free-to-air networks, and cable TV sort of supplemented it. And the first pay TV network was actually HBO, which started in the 70s, right? Again, those are some boring facts, but interesting thing is 80s is when we saw the explosion of pay TV networks, and the channels which got launched were the ones which were considered niche, and there wasn't sufficient interest among the bigger networks to carry them. So 80s or late 70s and 80s is when ESPN and CNN and Cartoon Network started. And over the next 2 decades, we saw an explosion of these networks. The business models were very strong, right? And primarily, there were 3 categories of content which drove that. Sports was one. There was sports, there were movies, and there was reality shows. So that's what 80s and 2000s were all about, right? 80s to 2000. Early 2000s is when we had digitization, we had the growth of internet, and things changed. It was much more effective to have regional networks. You could almost even have global networks, right? And we saw a lot of M&A, we saw a lot of consolidation, and we saw the premium content costs grow significantly. There were big conglomerates, chasing certain pieces of rights. And I think Rubin mentioned it. I think what made sports rights very, premium was the uniqueness of the content. So if you want to watch a United versus Liverpool game tonight, if I don't get it, I wouldn't be watching anything else, possibly, And such might not be the case. Let's say if I look at general entertainment, if I don't get something else, there might be alternatives. To live sports, there are no alternatives. So 2000s is when we saw the explosion of rights fees within sports rights, especially across all tiers, right here, ABC. I think things have changed a bit in the last 5 years or so. And what's happened is now we also have, again, enabled by the internet, we have direct-to-consumer players such as Netflix, HBO, who have a global footprint. we have high quality content on social media, and they're all drawing and bringing, securing audiences, taking up the audience time. And as a result, what we are seeing is, broadcasters, they still run very strong businesses, but we are seeing an erosion in viewership. We're seeing attrition in pay TV subscription, and which has a lot of downstream effect, right? There is pressure on the broadcasters and the platforms to be reducing their content costs and other costs as well, right? And I think Rubin said it very well, right? I still think that tier A content will, within sports, tier one will still continue to drive value and hold ground and even grow. My only thing is that the size of tier one content might get smaller and smaller progressively. And the tier two and tier three, and again, it's no universal tier two, tier three, it's market specific. They have to look at different modes of distribution and revenue generation. So overall, we are seeing a rationalization of rights fees, we are seeing alternate distribution modes, and we are seeing newer.
Very good, Joyee. You've captured that very succinctly. And you, of course, your career has taken you from one of the companies that was part of that huge boom in the early 2000s, and you've moved across now into one of the big beasts of the new global media landscape, Meta. So Meta and the other social media platforms, obviously very different businesses to broadcasters, and they look at sports rights in a different way. Can you give us some insight there? What sort of deals or partnerships does Meta do with sports organizations, and how are they similar or different to traditional media rights deals?
Yeah. So Kevin, what our team does is we work with the spectrum of sports stakeholders, the leagues, the digital publishers, the broadcasters, teams, and we help them build an audience on our platform and help them monetize while they do that. So in that sense, we wouldn't be, let's say, actively participating and securing rights via rights fees. What we try to do is we try to create a ecosystem where we can deliver both audience and revenue back to the rights holders. We bring in great content for our users. We grow audiences, and we build a suite of monetization tools. So really, for certain content, we might be the main platform of distribution. For certain content, we might be the surround platform of distribution. But it's really about extending the life of the content, and it's providing alternate channels and having great monetization opportunities for our partners to be building their audiences and revenue. So.
Very good. Are you able to give us any examples of major partnerships that maybe are good examples of how Meta does work with sports?
No, lots and lots. I mean, Rubin was there. We work with SportTV we work with them in Korea. We work with AFL, NRL, with the broadcasters across the globe. And as I said, it's not one solution that we offer to everyone. We sit down with the partners, try to understand their challenges, their opportunities, suggest solutions to them to the extent possible. So really, let's say if I look at someone like ICC, they might be posting their in-match clips on us. They might be posting their lead-in shows on us. For some others, it might just be a commentary from the outside. Really, there are various solutions. And what we try to do is we partner with the stakeholders, and we encourage them to experiment and to see that what gives them the best results.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Joyee. So the three guys there have taken us through some of the basic ideas that underpin the sports media rights space and some of the trends that have shaped it over the past couple of decades. We're going to go in next and ask a few questions about each of their personal journeys into the business. Some of our viewers may be wondering if their career can and will take them into this business. So maybe we can get some insights from the guys about how they've done that. Before we dive into that, I should reiterate, if you have any questions from the audience, please do use the chat function to post the questions, and we can put them to the three guys. Andrew, if I can come back to you, can you tell us how you first got into the sports media rights business, how you got to where you are today, and if there are any interesting pivotal moments in that journey.
Well, yeah, it's a good question. You look back sometimes and wonder how you did get here, and you sometimes sit in some stadiums watching games, and you are fortunate, or you think you're fortunate to be there. You might not be, because the view's often better on TV, actually, I think, of the match. But I was an IT lawyer. I trained as an IT lawyer back when the internet had just become a thing, which means that I am as old as I look. And as a junior lawyer, you got to do the digital things as it was then, because there was still analog television. So I ended up being an IT lawyer in an investment bank in London, and eventually realized, just after September 11th, realized that I wasn't learning anything. I was being paid a decent salary in London because it was an investment bank, and I just wasn't learning anything at all. And I had a fear that in 3 years' time, it would be me being made redundant by the bank because they just cut more staff. So I decided to leave, and I saw a job at ITV, which is the free-to-air terrestrial broadcaster in the UK. And what attracted me was it was an IT lawyer position, but they actually held 10% of Liverpool Football Club and 10% of Arsenal Football Club. And so you were going to get to work on the legal aspects of those clubs' websites. So I went to ITV. I took half the money, which I guess is a pivotal moment if you're asking for pivot, because we'd just taken out a mortgage. And yeah, that was a journey I started on, and I loved it. The whole atmosphere at a broadcaster in media is actually much more comfortable, much more open, inclusive than I found it was at the bank. And yeah, that set me on my way. And then bizarrely, about 4 years later, my boss, and I was never sure if he was trying to send me another message or not, my boss suggested I applied for a job at Team Marketing in Switzerland. And I did, and I got it. And Team Marketing run the Champions League. They are the agency, like FMA is for the AFC. They are UEFA's agency, as you know, on UEFA Champions League, UEFA Europa League. And didn't look back from there, really.
Very good. And if I were to ask you, what do you find? What are the parts of the job that you find most compelling or interesting? What's kept you in this space? What is it? What is it particularly about the sports media rights space that gets you going?
Rubin touched on it. Actually, it was really interesting. I spent a little bit of time as a buyer as well. It's horrible. You could even see the way that he was quite animated talking about the tender processes and the nerves and everything like that. For me, media rights, the tender process, the dynamics, the fact that you actually have to know people, it's still a people business. And I know lots of businesses say that, but it really is. You have to have good relationships. But for me, it's the tenders, and it's the dynamics of whether you go to tender, whether you don't. And that just changes all the time. That landscape moves all the time.
Okay, very good. There are a few questions coming in from the audience, so we'll address those. I'll jump on to Rubin and then Joyee next, and then we'll address some of those questions from the audience at the end. Rubin, wanted to ask you a little bit about your own personal journey in the sports media rights business. How did you get into this business, and were there any particular pivotal moments for you?
It's quite interesting because I'm a purely born and bred Singaporean product, right? And then I've started my career, with the Singapore Sports Council, which is, of course, one of the sponsors for today, right? I started out as an intern, working on the Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon, and then I got converted to a full-timer. So I was overseeing the sponsorship aspect and of course the operational aspect of the event and all that. But also at the time we were doing other events like the FINA Swimming World Cup and all that. So the pivotal moment on how I got into TV, also started from the Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon, all right? There was 1 year, when we appointed a broadcast company, all right? And then the producer and director at the time, all right? Just sort of like, it was a negative experience. And at that time, I realized that despite how much I thought I knew about sports, the TV aspect was something that I was clueless about, And that was when I told myself, I said, I need to learn about TV, such that, and at the time I was 25, 26 years old. So I told myself, I gave myself a timeline. I said, by 40 years old, never will anybody walk into a room, all right, and tell me something about TV sports TV, sports media that I do not know. And I happen to be turning 40 next month.
Might have to arrange a special quiz for you.
Yeah. So after that, I mean, quite frankly, after the Sports Council, I managed to find a role at StarHub, okay, acquiring sports content, and that was where I honed my broadcaster experience. Spent a couple to 3 years over there, and then after that, I moved to IMG as an agency, all right. And as most of our audience will know, IMG is the largest sports marketing agency in the world, all right. So that was a pretty good and fun time because I managed to be an account manager for the BWF. The Badminton World Federation, and managed to travel around the whole of Asia to actually watch badminton events and all that. Yeah. So I took another 2 to 3 years over there, and then I moved on to another agency that was distributing La Liga rights. Yeah. So after that, I was looking into premium football rights in a sense. And of course, I mean, somehow or other, I got into consulting at SportBusiness Group and became your colleague, Kev. All right. And then one of my consulting clients was SportTV. Right, who was actually participating in the rights tender process, okay, due to the exit of Fox Sports Asia. All right, so rights like Wimbledon, media rights like Wimbledon, US Open Tennis, the Open Championships Golf, MotoGP, UFC. All right, they were all out in the market, and then managed to sort of advise them accurately, okay, to acquire the rights. And then, of course, one thing led to another, and here I am. I sort of joined them as the Chief Content Strategy Officer.
Very good. And apart from the ambition to absolutely master and know everything about the sports TV business, what is it about this kind of part of the sports industry that keeps you in there, keeps you excited, you find compelling about the work?
I think being able to travel to watch major sports events and get paid for it, okay, it's something that is really, really unique to our industry, and I really liked it. But one of the challenging things is that sometimes you actually forget that you're actually working on the event, right? So there was this. I remember when I was doing I was account managing for the BWF. I went to the World Championships, all right, and it was held in Guangzhou. So men's singles final was between, for all those who actually know badminton and all that, men's singles final was between Lin Dan and Lee Chong Wei. All right, it was such an exciting event. All right, it went to the second game and then the third game, and then at the start of the third game, all right, the client came to me and said, "Rubin, I need you to do something. We need to step up to go to the media center." And I was like, "No." Yeah. So yeah, that's very much the downside. I mean, once you are working in it, you may not be able to enjoy it that much. Similarly, as a broadcaster, right? Okay, you are at home watching whatever Champions League, Premier League, and all that. You are the broadcaster. You're the head of acquisitions, or you are all of a sudden the screen goes black. All right, it is your problem, really. Everyone else is a subscriber. They were calling in asking for refunds and all that. When the screen goes black and you're watching your own channel, it's your problem.
Okay, very good. Well, listen, clearly you've got a huge passion for sport, and I think that's why a lot of people look at the industry. They're super interested in sport. They want to get into it, and it clearly gives you great experiences. But maybe be careful what you wish for sometimes.
Yeah, precisely, Kev.
Okay, Joyee would like to come to you with similar questions. Can you tell us a bit about your journey into the business and any kind of pivotal moments that really decided where you went?
I wish I was that plan in life, Kevin. Was working as a brand manager, running campaigns for a direct-to-consumer edtech company. And we used to run campaigns on various networks, including sports. And I saw the power of ESPN Star Sports. And I used to love sports. So one day I get an offer from them, and it was a dream come true for me. So I joined in sales. And in 2007, I moved to Singapore, acquiring content and running channels for Indian subcontinent networks. I eventually got Southeast Asia added to the portfolio, and in general stayed within sports, moved to general management roles with a focus on direct-to-consumer businesses and building digital business lines. 2018 is when I joined Meta, which I found was extremely interesting, the way Meta looked at content and the Meta looked at audiences. It's the non-rights acquisition model where you have audience and you leverage that by, keeping them engaged via bringing in quality content So it's it's audience before content in some way. So that's been my journey.
Very good, and three very different journeys there. For you, what is it about the sports media rights space or the sports media space that's kept you here? What have you found most satisfying or compelling about working in sports media?
Satisfying in a selfish way, so much transformation, disruption, everything. Look across markets, and you will still find sports content to be heading the viewership charts and still being the driver content for customer acquisition. So I think in some way, many of us betted on the right category to stay on. So that's been most satisfying. Sorry, and the other question was?
Well, it's kind of along similar lines. Just what do you find most compelling and interesting about the job, about working in this space?
Yeah, so let's say within the content space right now, and not just sports, is just the various options that audiences and platforms have. The wide spectrum where you have the traditional broadcasters, you have the platforms, direct-to-consumer conglomerates, you have social media, each having a strong value proposition, each in some way fighting for audience attention and time, different business models. And I think there's so many opportunities and so much of challenges, and I find that space incredibly exciting.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Joyee. Guys, thank you very much for taking us through those personal journeys and giving some insights into how it is working in the business. So, as I said, there have been some questions coming in from the audience, and we will tackle a few of them now. So, I'll put the question out to the three of you, and whoever wants to tackle it, please speak up. Let's start with the first question. So we've been asked, what are the top 3 pitfalls new rights holders should avoid? Three might be a bit of a challenge, but we're talking about pitfalls, challenges for rights holders within the industry. Does anyone want to jump in and pick out one?
I'll probably. Oh, sorry, Andrew, you go first.
No, I was just going to say, I think the question was new rights holder. I think it would probably be taking stock, not necessarily actually going for the most money offered by a niche broadcaster, and actually just getting your product out there, whether it's on Meta, whether it's on some highlights on a free-to-air broadcaster. You might not want the media money straight away. You might need to establish that product in territories. Of course, if the product already or the competition already has traction in a territory, then maybe that's the time to take more money from a paid broadcaster who's got more affordability. But I would certainly say building the brand, building awareness, because it's got to be a long-term game. You might take a short-term money, but the sport will lose any kind of relevance, I think.
Yeah. So,
Rubin, do you want to go?
Myself, I think the most important thing, especially for new rights holder, right? They have to enhance their understanding of media rights, whether it's employing someone who could advise them better, getting a consultant in or whatever, right? Because once you do not understand the space and you do not understand rights management, all right, you do not understand values, okay, of what your product can get, all right, there will be that mismatch expectations where you want $100 and the market may only be able to pay 50 cents or $1. All right, so that's one thing. The other thing that I noticed in new rights holders, or when they try to put up new rights and all that, okay, they are often always saying, I want money, all right, which alludes back to what Andrew was saying, okay, you got to invest in your product. You got to invest in your product before the money can flow in, okay, and more often than not, all right, because of the inability to appreciate where the level of your property is, all right, you're always, the new rights holders will be in a state where they are thinking of taking before when they right at the start they should be giving. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rubin.
I can add to that, Kevin. I think
sure.
I'll say, look at audience first. If you have an engaged audience, if you have equity with your fans, revenues will flow. That's one. So don't challenge the status quo, challenge the distribution, existing distribution channels, and think of how you build an audience base. And second, I'll say is just be innovative in terms of how you can drive new revenue business lines, right? leverage technology, and we have seen some great examples. And I think, as everyone mentioned, it's easier for a tier 1, tier 2 to get distribution and revenue. It's so much more challenging for the newer ones. So you have to play. You can't be playing the same game as them. You have to be very different.
Okay, great stuff, guys. Thank you very much. And that question was from Oliver in Singapore, I believe. Next question. So we're being asked, what is the hottest Asian sports media rights property right now, and what will it be in 2034? So 12 years away. Does anyone want to jump in on that?
Well, I'd say the Premier League is probably... Sorry, go on, Joyee.
Sorry, it must be. I mean, in Asia is pretty large, right? So let's in Southeast Asia, of course, it's football, right? Other than Philippines, which is basketball, right? Will things change in 2034? Sure, things will. It's like one thing is certain that things will change. Will the pecking order change? No one knows, right? But it'll be wrong to assume that EPL is still going to be the number one. It might still be, but 15 years in the world of technology and with what's happening, it's like years. It's very far away.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew,
I've got a bit more clarity on the future for you, Joyee. I mean, AFC football will certainly be the hottest property in 12 years' time. I think we can all accept that on here. And right now, I think it must be the Premier League. They're live in the market at the moment, and I mean those brands and people are paying significant rights fees for that. So it must be the most hot at the moment.
Yeah, for me, it's dependent on the local athlete's performance, actually, right? Okay, I mean, as Joyee mentioned, Asia is so huge right now. Okay, right now, the hottest property in Singapore right now is BWF. Okay, because we've just gotten our first world champion in badminton, right? And then I mean, the broadcasters are excited about it. Free-to-air broadcasters come, knocking on the doors and saying, "Oh, we also want to show our boy play at All England next month," and stuff like that. In Indonesia, it's different, right? It's always dependent on the local athletes' performance. Okay, so suddenly they have, for Indonesia, they did quite well in the Suzuki Cup. They got into the final, and one of their players has just gotten a spot in a J League 2, second division in Japan. All right, team, and suddenly the Indonesian broadcasters are asking around, where do I get J2 right? SportTV, do you have it, etc., and all that. Yeah, so it's always dependent on the local athletes' performance, and increasingly as in Southeast Asia, okay, as the level of performances across different sports goes up, right, then the appetite changes, right? So you always, as a rights holder, you always want to hope, all right, that in particular territories which are maybe used to be classified a tier 2 or tier 3 territory for you, okay, some athlete actually does well in it, and then all of a sudden the attention, the viewership all just goes through the roof and all. Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think that might be all the time we have got. Listen, that was a fantastic discussion. We covered an awful lot of ground very quickly, but really superb insights from everyone. So thanks very much, Andrew. Thank you, Rubin. Thank you, Joyee, for excellent contributions. And to finish up, Jasper is going to come in and say a few final words.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you to all the speakers. That was an excellent session. And thank you to all the questions that were coming in. There's a few that we couldn't get to because we were out of time. But if you join the meet and greet session after this, the meet the speakers session, you can ask the questions directly to them. So Vera and other people, very sorry we couldn't get to your questions. That was excellent. Football matters, icons matter, and badminton matters. There you go. So as I said, if you want to meet the speakers, go back into the agenda, click on the session, and you can meet them in a Q&A session right away after this. And there's going to be more this afternoon at 5 o'clock Singapore and Hong Kong. We are going to be meeting with 11 Sports, beIN TV, and World Table Tennis to continue the conversation around sporting rights and how they are bought and sold. So thank you all for joining us this morning or this afternoon for the first ever Sports Matters Academy. I can't remember the name of our companies anymore. The Sports Matters Academy. Join the speaker Q&A, and we'll see you at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.
Asia, the new center of the world game. 1 in 2 football fans globally live on this continent. Here, homegrown legends rise and champions are crowned. Proud nations fly their colors, and tribes of fans in booming cities unleash their energy. Intense, diverse. Here, local is king. It's a new era of Asian football, a new type of fandom, a new chapter to an historic story.